Long ago, when the world was still young and time was measured not by clocks but by the movement of stars and shadows, there rose a land between two mighty rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. It was here, in ancient Mesopotamia, that the earliest known civilization carved their stories into clay and stone. They spoke of kings and floods, of gods and monsters, and among their most mysterious tales were those of the Anunnaki and the Igigi. But who were they, these beings so often whispered in the dark corridors of temples and etched into the walls of forgotten ziggurats? The scribes of Sumer tell us the Anunnaki were the offspring of Anu, the god of the sky, and Kai, the goddess of the earth. Their name alone, Anunnaki, reveals something more than just mythology. It means, quite literally, those who from heaven to earth came. This wasn't a poetic turn of phrase. The Sumerians weren't known for vague metaphors. Their records were direct, intentional. They spoke of the Anunnaki not as dreams or spirits, but as very real beings that came down from the sky. And they didn't come alone. There was another group, a second host of divine figures, the Igigi. If the Anunnaki were the high lords, the decision-makers, then the Igigi were their servants, their watchers. According to the old stories, there were 300 of them, celestial beings who lived in the heavens. The Igigi were tasked with labor, with maintaining the order of things. But like any servant bound to endless toil, they grew weary. One night, in the quiet hours when the stars shimmered like silver eyes in the dark, the Igigi gathered. They were angry. They were tired. They were gods, yes, but they had become slaves, and so they conspired against their masters. The rebellion of the Igigi shook the heavens. Fire rained from the sky. The harmony of the cosmos trembled, and in the midst of this chaos, the Anunnaki gathered in their council, not with thunderbolts or fury, but with reason. They made a decision that would change the course of human history forever. They would create a new being, one that would take the burden of labor from the Igigi, one that would serve without question, one made not of light, but of clay and blood. And thus, humanity was born. It is a haunting origin, isn't it? The idea that we were created not out of love or divine inspiration, but as a solution to a labor problem. And yet, that's the story the ancients left behind. That is the tale inscribed on the crumbling tablets of the Atrahasis epic. But the story doesn't end there. The roles of the Anunnaki and Igigi evolve throughout the centuries. In Babylonian retellings, the names shift, the details twist, but the presence of these beings remains. In one of the oldest surviving myths, the descent of Inanna to the netherworld, we find a rare and chilling description of the Anunnaki. Here, they are not creators or kings, they are judges, 7 terrifying entities who sit in silence, their gaze unblinking, their hearts unmoved. Inanna, the goddess of love and war, descends to the underworld to confront her sister Ereshkigal. But it is the Anunnaki who seal her fate. Without a word, they condemn her. Their judgment is swift, their faces stone. What kind of gods were these? The ancients painted them with many brushes. In some tales, the Anunnaki were gods of wisdom, sages who guided kings and taught mankind how to build, write, and rule. In others, they were miners, laboring in the depths of the earth for some unknown resource, their strength unmatched, their purpose cryptic. Still more stories place them among the stars, descending from the sky in fiery chariots, wrapped in garments of light. Were they gods? Were they beings of flesh and bone, or something else entirely? This question has plagued scholars and seekers for centuries. The Sumerians never called their writings mythology. To them, these were historical accounts. The Anunnaki were as real as the kings who built temples and the rivers that fed their crops. Yet over time, modern interpretations blurred the lines. Historians, uncomfortable with the supernatural, filed these beings under myth. But not everyone agrees. Some researchers have drawn striking comparisons between the Anunnaki and the Nephilim, the mysterious figures mentioned in the ancient Hebrew texts. In the book of Genesis, we find a cryptic verse. There were giants in the earth in those days, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. These giants, these Nephilim, are described as beings who came from above and mingled with humanity. Sound familiar? The word Nephilim stems from the Hebrew root nfl, meaning to fall or to descend. So, once again we encounter this theme, beings from the sky descending to the earth. Just like the Anunnaki, could they be the same? Are the Nephilim and the Anunnaki simply different cultural interpretations of the same ancient truth? It's possible. Civilizations often borrow and reshape stories across time. The Babylonians, who inherited much from the Sumerians, wrote their own tales. The Enuma Elish, for example, speaks of cosmic battles and divine beings shaping the heavens and the earth. In these texts, the Anunnaki appear again, not as shadowy background characters, but as central figures in the creation of the world and the fate of man. And then there's the etymology, always a window into hidden meanings. The Sumerian roots of Anunnaki, An for heaven, Kai for earth, give us those who from heaven to earth came. Not born, not created, but came. It implies arrival, travel, a descent. It's a definition that has fascinated not only archaeologists, but also alternative historians and theorists. Some suggest the Anunnaki were extraterrestrial beings, advanced entities who came to Earth in a time before time, perhaps to mine resources, perhaps to guide early humans, or perhaps for purposes we still can't comprehend. To the Sumerians, they weren't just legends. They built temples to them, offered sacrifices, inscribed their names in prayers, and called upon them in rituals. Their influence was immense, and their presence eternal. Even the later Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians kept their names alive, in statues, in hymns, in stories passed down for thousands of years. The Anunnaki and the Igigi are not forgotten. They live on in our imagination, in our questions, in the silent places of history where stone and dust whisper of forgotten gods. And perhaps, just perhaps, they live on in more than memory. The winds over Sumer whispered many names, but among them, one echoed more than most. Etana, the shepherd king of Kish. His tale, carved into clay and preserved by time, carries not only the weight of a kingdom, but the ache of a man desperate for something all rulers craved, a son to carry on their legacy. The story of Etana begins not with war nor with glory, but with a prayer. Kish, the great city-state, had flourished under Etana's rule. He was chosen by the gods, anointed not only by the people but by fate. Yet the halls of his palace were quiet. No child's laughter, no heir to sit at his side, no son to inherit the throne. In the solitude of his chambers, Etana turned his eyes to the heavens. The gods had granted him power, victory, and wisdom, but not the one thing his heart longed for most. And so, his quest began, not for gold or glory, but for something far more sacred, the plant of birth, a mythical herb said to grant fertility to those who consumed it. It was hidden, unreachable, somewhere between earth and sky, and for a mortal king to find it, he would need help, not from his priests or warriors, but from a creature of both feather and fate. Here enters the eagle. Now this eagle was no ordinary bird. Like the lion rules the land, the eagle ruled the skies. But before he could become Etana's guide, he too had a story, a tangled fable of betrayal and consequence. Once, in a grove blessed by the gods, an eagle and a serpent made a pact. They would share the branches of a great tree, the eagle nesting at the top, the serpent curling at its base. As long as they respected one another's space, harmony would reign. But harmony is fragile, and temptation is a voice that never truly fades. One day, when the serpent was away, the eagle looked down from its perch. Below were the serpent's young, defenseless and unguarded. The eagle, defying the sacred pact, swooped down and devoured them all. When the serpent returned, it found only silence and feathers. The gods do not look kindly upon broken oaths. With the help of the sun, god Shamash, the serpent set a trap. It lured the eagle with false promises, then struck. The once mighty bird was cast into a pit, its wings broken, its pride shattered, left to die slowly among the bones of its prey. But fate, as always, had other plans. Etana, searching for the plant of birth, came upon the pit. Inside, the eagle called out, its voice hoarse with regret and pain. The king, moved by the creature's suffering, helped it, not because he had to, but because mercy, in the heart of a good ruler, is stronger than judgment. Grateful and reborn, the eagle offered to repay Etana. It would take him where no man had gone before, high into the heavens. And so, the king climbed onto the eagle's back, and together they soared. The world below shrank to a patchwork of rivers and fields. The stars seemed closer than ever. The gates of heaven shimmered in the distance, but no mortal can look too long upon the realm of the gods without being undone. Etana grew afraid. The thin air, the blinding light, the weight of being so far from earth, it overcame him. He begged the eagle to turn back, but the plant of birth still waited above. Hope and terror warred within him. Some versions of the story say they reached the gates of the gods. Others say they fell, plummeting back to earth, the sky tearing behind them like a wound. Either way, the tale of Etana is not one of easy victory. It is a story about yearning, about the impossible desire to defy nature, to bargain with heaven, to rewrite destiny. And like all great myths, it survives not because it offers answers, but because it asks the right questions. Why does a ruler risk everything for a son? Why does betrayal poison even sacred agreements? Why do we reach for what lies beyond our grasp? The tablets that tell Etana's story were first unearthed from the ruins of Nineveh, deep within the library of King Ashurbanipal, a man who himself was obsessed with preserving the wisdom of the ancients. Among the thousands of texts discovered there, the Etana epic stood out, not only for its poetic language, but for the haunting image of a man flying toward the stars on the back of a bird. Even older versions, in fragmentary form, were found in Mari, Tel Harmal, and Susa, testimony to how far the story traveled, how deeply it etched itself into the cultural veins of the region. Etana's story wasn't just legend, it was lineage. You see, Etana is listed in the Sumerian king list, that strange and sometimes mythical document that blends history with the divine. According to it, Etana was the 13th king of Kish, said to have ruled for over 1,500 years. While we now understand such reign lengths to be symbolic, not literal, the inclusion of Etana's name suggests something powerful, that real kings, ruling real cities, saw him as part of their divine heritage. The myth of Etana was not just a bedtime tale or temple chant, it was dynastic propaganda wrapped in wonder, a way to legitimize power by linking it to divine favor, a way for kings to say, "I too am chosen. I too fly on the wings of destiny." But beneath the layers of power and politics, there remains the heart of the story, a man, a bird, a journey between realms. Somewhere, deep in the ruined courtyards of Kish, archaeologists have uncovered cylinder seals that depict a figure clinging to an eagle as it rises toward the heavens. Tiny as they are, these seals tell the same story passed down through generations, of a ruler who dared to ask the gods for more. Did Etana ever find the plant of birth? Some versions say yes, that he returned home, gifted with a son, and secured his line. Others end in silence, a fall, a shadow, a king lost in the clouds. But perhaps in the end, the answer doesn't matter, because the power of the myth lies not in its resolution, but in the leap itself. Etana reminds us of something ancient and eternal, that every soul, king or commoner, looks up to the sky and wonders what waits beyond. And some dare to reach for it. Once in the heart of the ancient world, where the great rivers of the Tigris and Euphrates met the desert sands, there ruled a king unlike any other, Naram-Sin of Akkad. His name, etched into the annals of time, is both a testament to his power and a warning to those who would dare to challenge the gods. Naram-Sin was not just a ruler, he was a conqueror. Under his reign, Akkad became the most powerful empire the world had ever known. His soldiers marched across the lands of Mesopotamia, defeating enemies and expanding the borders of his kingdom. The cities of Sumer bowed to his might, and his name was spoken with reverence throughout the known world. He was, in the eyes of many, a god among men, a ruler ordained by the heavens themselves. But as the years passed, the weight of power began to settle heavily upon Naram-Sin's shoulders. His victories, once glorious, turned into arrogance. He grew bold, believing that his strength came not just from his armies, but from the divine favor that had carried him this far. And it was this very arrogance that would lead him to make a fateful decision, one that would forever change the destiny of Akkad. At the heart of Naram-Sin's arrogance was his defiance of Enlil, the supreme god of Sumer. Enlil, the god of wind and air, had long been the protector of Akkad. His temple, a magnificent structure, stood at the center of the kingdom, its towering ziggurat reaching toward the heavens, an emblem of Akkad's divine connection. Enlil had blessed Naram-Sin with his power, but the king, intoxicated by his own success, began to see himself as greater than any god. It was this hubris that led to a terrible act. Naram-Sin ordered the destruction of Enlil's sacred temple. The king, in his arrogance, believed that the gods had no more sway over him, that he had surpassed their power and no longer needed their favor. And so, he desecrated Enlil's temple, burning it to the ground and defiling its holy grounds. He thought the gods would turn a blind eye to his actions, for he had the might of Akkad behind him, and that, he believed, was all that mattered. But the gods do not forget. Enlil, enraged by the king's insolence, withdrew his protection from Akkad. His wrath was swift and terrible. The once prosperous kingdom, which had flourished under Naram-Sin's rule, now began to crumble. The first sign of the gods' punishment came in the form of famine. The rains ceased to fall, and the fertile lands of Akkad, which had once been rich with crops, withered into dust. The people cried out for mercy, but their pleas went unanswered. The grain stores ran dry, and starvation swept across the land. The once proud city of Akkad, which had stood as a beacon of civilization, was now in the grip of a devastating famine. But the punishment did not end there. The Gutians, a barbaric people from the mountains to the north, saw the weakening of Akkad as an opportunity to strike. With their swift, savage raids, they invaded the crumbling empire. The Gutians tore through the lands of Akkad, burning villages, sacking cities, and killing those who stood in their way. Akkad, once a powerful empire, now stood defenseless before the fury of the invaders. And so, the curse of Akkad was complete. The once great kingdom, reduced to rubble, was left to fade into the annals of history. Naram-Sin, the mighty king who had defied the gods, was left with nothing, his empire destroyed, his people scattered, and his name cursed. In the years that followed, the tale of Naram-Sin became a warning, a parable told from one generation to the next. The gods, it seemed, would not tolerate defiance, and no matter how powerful a king may become, there was always a price to pay for angering the divine. "Do not anger the gods," the story seemed to say, for even the mightiest of rulers could be brought low by their wrath. But was the fall of Akkad truly the result of divine punishment, or was it the natural consequence of the king's actions? This question has puzzled historians for centuries. From a historical perspective, the fall of Akkad can be seen as the result of a combination of factors. The destruction of Enlil's temple was undoubtedly a bold act, but it was not the only reason for the kingdom's decline. Akkad's expansion had brought it into conflict with neighboring peoples, and the strain of constant warfare had weakened the empire's defenses. Additionally, the Gutian invasion was a significant blow to the kingdom, and the famine that preceded it was likely the result of a prolonged period of drought and mismanagement. However, from a mythological standpoint, the story of Naram-Sin's defiance is much more than a simple tale of political downfall. It is a story that speaks to the fragile relationship between humans and the divine. The gods, in this interpretation, are not mere symbols of nature or fate. They are active forces in the world, shaping the destiny of kings and empires. Naram-Sin's defiance of Enlil is seen as a moral lesson. No mortal, no matter how powerful, can escape the judgment of the gods. His arrogance, his refusal to acknowledge the divine, ultimately led to the destruction of his kingdom, a kingdom that had once stood as a testament to the power of the gods. The myth of Naram-Sin serves as a powerful reminder of the limits of human power and the importance of humility. The king's downfall is not merely a story of political failure. It is a cautionary tale about the dangers of overreaching, of thinking oneself invincible. The gods in this narrative are not capricious or vengeful for the sake of it. Rather, they represent the natural order, the balance of the cosmos. By defying that balance, Naram-Sin set in motion a chain of events that led to his own ruin. The story of Naram-Sin's defiance, however, is more than just a myth. It is a key part of the historical narrative of Akkad, one that shaped the way future generations would view the relationship between kings and gods. The Akkadian Empire, despite its fall, left behind a rich legacy, one that influenced the cultures that came after it. And even as Akkad faded into obscurity, the story of Naram-Sin's defiance lived on, etched into clay, preserved in the memory of the people, and passed down through the generations. For those who look back at the tale of Naram-Sin, there remains a central theme that cannot be ignored. The gods are always watching. And while mortals may have their moment of triumph, they must always remember that their power is fleeting. The gods, it seems, are the true arbiters of fate, and no ruler, no matter how mighty, can escape their judgment. The fall of Akkad, like all great myths, carries with it a deeper truth. A truth that speaks not only to the ancient world, but to all who seek to understand the fragility of power, the consequences of hubris, and the eternal dance between mortals and the divine. In the world of the ancient gods, there was one deity who was both a beacon of light and a force of judgment, Utu Shamash, the sun god. His name was spoken with reverence and awe, for he held the power of the sun, which gave life to all things, and the authority to judge both the living and the dead. Known by two names, Utu to the Sumerians and Shamash to the Akkadians, his role in the pantheon was unparalleled. He was not only the light of the heavens, but also the ruler of justice, guiding the world with his rays of truth. Utu Shamash's divine role was far-reaching, touching every aspect of life in the ancient world. As the sun god, he was responsible for the daily journey of the sun across the sky, bringing light and warmth to the earth below. But his influence did not end there. Utu Shamash was also seen as the great judge, the arbiter of both human and divine affairs. His light was not only a source of warmth, but a beacon of truth, casting its rays on both the righteous and the wicked, leaving no place for shadows to hide. In the ancient myths, Utu Shamash's family ties were just as important as his role in the divine order. He was the son of Nana, the moon god, and the twin brother of Inanna, the goddess of love and war. The relationship between Utu and Inanna was one of mutual respect and affection, though their paths were often different. While Inanna's sphere of influence was war, love, and fertility, Utu Shamash's realm was rooted in justice and the heavens. Together, they formed a powerful cosmic duo, embodying the balance between light and dark, order and chaos, life and death. As the god of the sun, Utu Shamash was often depicted with a solar disk hovering above his head, a symbol of his power over the heavens. His chariot, drawn by fiery horses, was said to carry him across the sky each day, his presence lighting up the earth with its radiance. This image of a winged chariot racing across the heavens was one of the most powerful symbols in Mesopotamian iconography, representing the unstoppable force of justice that Utu Shamash embodied. In the myths and stories of the ancient world, Utu Shamash was called upon to act as the divine judge, settling disputes and ensuring the maintenance of order. His role as a judge extended beyond the realm of the living. He was also the one who passed judgment on the souls of the dead, weighing their deeds and deciding their fate in the afterlife. His judgment was fair and impartial, guided by the unyielding light of truth. One of the most famous stories in which Utu Shamash plays a pivotal role involves the hero Etana. When Etana, king of the city of Kish, was on his quest to find the plant of birth and secure an heir to his throne, he encountered great obstacles. The eagle and snake, once companions and symbols of harmony, betrayed him, plunging him into a near-fatal fall. It was in this moment of peril that Etana called upon Utu Shamash for help. The sun god, ever watchful and just, answered the king's plea. With the light of his wisdom and the radiance of his power, Utu Shamash helped Etana rise above the challenges he faced, guiding him safely through the trials. Utu Shamash's assistance was not limited to kings and mortals. He also had a significant role in the story of Gilgamesh, the great hero and king of Uruk. In the epic, Gilgamesh seeks wisdom and immortality in the face of human frailty. When the hero and his companion Enkidu were caught in a perilous situation, they turned to Utu Shamash for guidance. Once again, the sun god answered, shining his light on Gilgamesh's path and aiding him in his quest. But not all pleas were answered by the sun god. One of the most intriguing tales of Utu Shamash involves his refusal to grant a request made by his sister, Inanna. In the myth of the Hulupu tree, Inanna seeks Utu Shamash's help in clearing a tree so that she might use it to create a throne and a bed. She pleads with her brother, but Utu Shamash refuses, citing the importance of justice and fairness. This refusal highlights an important aspect of Utu Shamash's character. He was not swayed by familial ties or emotions. His decisions were rooted in justice, a quality that made him both revered and feared. But it was in the afterlife that Utu Shamash's role as the divine judge truly shone. As the one who oversaw the souls of the departed, he determined their fates in the underworld. His light was said to pierce through the darkness of the netherworld, illuminating the judgment process and ensuring that justice was done. Those who had lived righteous lives were granted peace and favor, while the wicked were sent to suffer. Utu Shamash's impartiality in this role further cemented his position as the god of justice. The cultural impact of Utu Shamash was far-reaching, extending beyond the myths and stories of Mesopotamia. His influence can be seen in the Code of Hammurabi, the famous law code written by the Babylonian king Hammurabi. In the preamble to the code, Hammurabi claims that the laws were handed down to him by the gods, including Shamash, Utu Shamash. The king presents the laws as divinely ordained, a reflection of the god's role as the ultimate judge. The code itself, which set out principles of justice, fairness, and retribution, was believed to be inspired by Shamash's wisdom and guidance. Temples dedicated to Utu Shamash were built throughout Mesopotamia, with one of the most famous being the Ibaba temple in Sippar. This grand temple, whose name means House of the Light, was dedicated to the sun god and served as the center of his worship. It was said that the temple housed a statue of Shamash that radiated a divine light, representing the god's ever-present guidance and judgment. Pilgrims from all over Mesopotamia would journey to this sacred site to seek the god's favor and ask for his judgment on various matters, from personal disputes to questions of divine will. As the centuries passed, the worship of Utu Shamash continued to influence the people of Mesopotamia and beyond. His legacy as the sun god and divine judge endured, shaping the religious and moral frameworks of ancient civilizations. His role as the patron of travelers also ensured that he remained an important deity for those who journeyed across the vast lands of the ancient Near East. Utu Shamash's symbolism, the solar disk, the winged chariot, and his unwavering association with justice, became deeply embedded in the cultural consciousness of the people. He was not just the sun god, he was the guardian of truth, the divine force that ensured the world remained in order, that right triumphed over wrong, and that the light of justice would always shine, even in the darkest corners of the earth. As we look back upon the legacy of Utu Shamash, we find more than just a sun god. We find a symbol of divine order, a reminder that no matter how dark the world may become, the light of justice will always rise, guiding the righteous and punishing the wicked. He was, and remains, a figure of profound significance, not just in the myths of Mesopotamia, but in the ongoing human quest for truth and fairness. In the end, Utu Shamash's story is not just one of divine power and mythological grandeur. It is also a reflection of humanity's eternal struggle with the concept of justice, a theme that resonates across cultures and centuries, transcending the bounds of time and place. And in that eternal struggle, the sun god's light continues to guide us, shining brightly on the path of righteousness and truth. As the ancient world unfolded, the gods of Mesopotamia left an indelible mark on the civilizations that came after them. One of the most intriguing aspects of their mythology is the shared themes and motifs found across cultures. Two groups of divine beings stand at the heart of this exploration: the Anunnaki and the Nephilim. While these names might seem distant from one another, there is a striking similarity that transcends time and space, a motif of descending from the heavens to earth. It is this shared element that connects the two groups in a way that raises questions, ignites debates, and draws comparisons between the myths of ancient Mesopotamia and later religious traditions. The Anunnaki, as we have explored, were the deities of ancient Sumer and Akkad, often depicted as powerful gods who came from the heavens to the earth. Their name, derived from the Sumerian roots An, sky or heaven, and Ki, earth, literally translates to those who from heaven to earth came. These beings were known for their great power, wisdom, and influence over the affairs of humanity. In the Sumerian mythos, they were not just gods of abstract concepts. They were deeply involved in the lives of mortals, often depicted as regulating, guiding, or even shaping human destiny. Similarly, the Nephilim in the Judeo-Christian tradition are often portrayed as beings who descended from heaven. In the book of Genesis, they are referred to as the sons of God, who took human wives, and their offspring were giants. This act of descending from the heavens and interacting with humanity is a key parallel between the Anunnaki and the Nephilim. In both traditions, these beings are described as possessing power and wisdom, and their descent from heaven marks a significant and often unsettling moment in the mythological narratives. One of the most striking similarities between the Anunnaki and the Nephilim is their role as divine beings who interact with humanity. In both the Sumerian and biblical accounts, these beings come down to earth and influence the mortal world, whether through direct involvement in human affairs or through their very presence. This shared motif of a divine descent speaks to a deep cultural archetype found in multiple traditions, the idea that the heavens and the earth are not wholly separate, and that the divine can, and sometimes must, intervene in the affairs of the mortal world. In the case of the Anunnaki, the descent is often seen as part of a broader cosmic order. These beings were not simply celestial entities who had a passing interest in humanity. They were involved in the creation of the world, in the shaping of civilization, and in the regulation of life on Earth. Similarly, the Nephilim's descent in the Book of Genesis is framed as a critical event that shaped the very course of human history. The actions of these divine beings, according to the text, led to the birth of the giants, beings of immense power, and were ultimately one of the causes of the Great Flood that wiped out humanity. In both traditions, these descending figures leave a profound and lasting impact on the human race. But while the Anunnaki and the Nephilim share the motif of descending from the heavens, there is another layer of complexity in the mythology of the Igigi, another group of divine beings in the Mesopotamian pantheon. The Igigi are often described as a subgroup of the Anunnaki, and their role is particularly fascinating when compared to the Nephilim. In some versions of the Mesopotamian myth, the Igigi are depicted as celestial beings who were responsible for carrying out the more labor-intensive tasks of the gods, such as working in the heavens or serving in the underworld. However, the Igigi's role shifts dramatically in the myth of Enki and the creation of man, where they are portrayed as being tired of their heavy labor and rebel against the gods, demanding a new creation to take over their tasks. This rebellion leads to a significant transformation. The gods decide to create humans to bear the burden of work, and in doing so, the Igigi are cast aside, leaving humans to take their place. This story of the Igigi parallels the narrative of the Watchers in biblical tradition, who are often seen as a direct counterpart to the Nephilim. The Watchers, like the Igigi, are divine beings who descend from heaven and interact with humanity in ways that have significant consequences. In the Book of Enoch, the Watchers teach humanity forbidden knowledge, leading to their eventual punishment. This rebellion and the imparting of knowledge mirrors the Igigi's revolt, and both stories share a deep connection to the themes of divine intervention, transgression, and the consequences of crossing boundaries between the divine and the mortal. The connection between the Anunnaki, the Igigi, and the Nephilim also extends beyond the specific cultural contexts of Sumer and Judeo-Christianity. These myths, in their varying forms, highlight a pervasive cosmic struggle that transcends individual cultures. The idea that divine beings descend from the heavens to interact with humanity reflects a common belief in many ancient cultures, that the heavens and earth are intimately connected, and that the gods are not distant entities but active participants in the lives of humans. As the ancient civilizations of Mesopotamia laid the groundwork for much of Western religion and mythology, their influence can be seen in the religious traditions that followed. The impact of Mesopotamian thought can be traced in the biblical stories of angels, the fall of man, and the judgment of the wicked. The shared themes of divine descent, the imparting of knowledge, and the subsequent punishment are motifs that echo through time, appearing in Judeo-Christian narratives as well as later religious and mythological traditions. Moreover, the Mesopotamian myths also influenced the rise of other religions in the Near East. The traditions of Zoroastrianism, Hellenistic philosophy, and even Judaism all bear traces of Mesopotamian influence, particularly in their views on the relationship between the divine and human realms. For instance, The role of divine justice and judgment seen in the Mesopotamian gods is mirrored in the concept of divine judgment found in Zoroastrianism, where the soul's deeds are weighed after death. Similarly, the notion of divine beings descending to teach or guide humanity can be found in Greek mythology, particularly in the stories of gods and demigods who walk among mortals and shape their fates. The shared motifs of the Anunnaki, the Igigi, and the Nephilim offer a fascinating glimpse into the ways in which ancient cultures understood the relationship between the heavens and the earth and the power that divine beings held over the fate of humanity. The similarities between these traditions suggest that the idea of gods descending from the heavens was not unique to one culture, but rather a universal theme that resonated deeply with the ancient mind. Whether these beings were seen as gods, sages, or historical figures, their presence in the myths of ancient cultures highlights a timeless connection between the divine and the mortal, a connection that continues to shape our understanding of the world even today. And so, the story of the Anunnaki, the Igigi, and the Nephilim endures, carried across time and space, influencing the cultures of the ancient world and echoing through the religious and mythological traditions that followed. Their legacy, bound by the shared motif of descending from the heavens, remains a testament to the enduring power of these ancient myths, stories that continue to captivate, inspire, and challenge our understanding of the divine and the mortal realms.